Britain has sent a secret $30 million arsenal of weapons to foreign-backed militants in Syria, including assault rifles, machine gun grenades and anti-tank missiles, according to the Daily Mail. For months now, insurgents have reportedly been getting training from the US, Britain and France in Jordan. This does not sound non-lethal at all. Is the West, in effect, arming the known terrorists active in Syria? This is the debate.
A gift from Britain to the Western-backed insurgents in Syria. London has reportedly sent a secret shipment of weapons to the militants fighting the Syrian government. The cachet reportedly includes $30 million worth of assault rifles, machine guns, grenades and anti-tank rockets. The weapons were apparently sent out 7 weeks ago and could be in the hands of the militants by now. Reports say some British weapons are already in the hands of the insurgents after arriving in Syria via Saudi Arabia and Qatar. Both countries have made big weapons purchases from the UK recently. There's another report saying that the US is also sending artillery, armored vehicles, and different weapon systems to the insurgents in Syria. A ranking U.S. military source says the Pentagon made the decision to send a major part of its light and semi-heavy weapon system to the Syrian insurgents when it decided to pull out of Afghanistan. The source says the weapons will be sent to Syria through Turkey and Jordan. Now, the question is, who will take responsibility if these weapons are used against civilians as they have been in the past? So far, the insurgents have not only targeted Syrian army troops, but many ordinary citizens in the absence of any condemnation from their Western backers.
When some people will use these weapons, will the United States be responsible for their actions, like the whole debate that was generated back in the 1980s and afterwards as a result of the United States support of the Mujahideen in Afghanistan? Also, the whole landscape, strategically speaking, lacks any kind of mechanism to regulate the flow of arms.
Sending weapons is not all the West offers to insurgents in Syria. Media reports say American instructors are training anti-Damascus militants in modern warfare in Jordan. British newspaper The Guardian has reported that Britain and France are also taking part in the US-led effort. German weekly Der Spiegel adds more details. It says Jordanian intelligence services are also involved in the program. Observers believe that the insurgency in Syria is part of a foreign project to bring about regime change in the country and ultimately change the geopolitical map of the Middle East in favor of the West and its regional allies.
Well, joining me now live from London is filmmaker and political analyst Mr. Sukant Chandan, and with us on the line from Beirut, founder of Hizb ut-Tahrir UK branch, Sheikh Omar Bakri. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being with us. I'll put my first question to our guest in Beirut, Mr. Bakri. Now, Mr. Bakri, some of the weapons and ammunitions that are being sent to the insurgents are being used for attacks against civilian targets. And a few days ago, we know the US blocked a motion at the UN Security Council which was against terror attacks in Syria. And some people are saying now that this shows that the US is just being hypocritical when it comes to the situation in Syria. What's your take?
No doubt that is the people of Syria who are really rise to defend their life, they reach level. They are really now accepting any help from outsiders, and which is we do not accept any interference from America or from Britain in any shape or form. However, the weapon to be supplied to the Mujahideen or to the people who are prized against the criminal regime, it is really not going to be used against civilians. It's going to be used against the government, against its forces. That is really what every sincere Muslim, he will be really fight. He fight against those who are committing crime, those who are committing atrocities, and that in this case, the Syrian armies. So I do not accept as a Muslim to use weapons against civilians, because that is really what the government do, not what the Mujahideen or those who are rise against the regime. The insurgents are not in any way permissible for them to attack any civilian, Muslim or non-Muslim.
Okay, well, let's bring in Mr. Sukant Chandon on this as well. Mr. Chandon, the question basically right now is what our guest there in Beirut is saying, whether these weapons, these ammunitions that are reaching these militants are in the right hands. Now, our guest there is saying that these weapons are not being used against civilians, but how can that be determined?
Good evening, sister. First of all, I'd like to impart my condolences and respect to the people of Venezuela and brother leader Hugo Chávez's family. He is the latest and greatest martyr of our international struggle against imperialism and Zionism after Muammar Gaddafi and the late Yasser Arafat. And like the Latin American context historically of the empire and imperialism using death squads to negatively impact and traumatize and overthrow resistant governments of the people of Latin America, this is exactly the same type of formula they are employing currently against the Syrian government, and also that they employed in the Libyan context and now in Mali, looking towards Algeria and other countries of the Sahel, and which they've employed against Afghanistan and Iraq. You know, we're dealing with basically the most warlike, the most frankly shaitani and evil forces that humanity has ever seen, in the form of the British government, the French government, and the United States government. They have only but been interested in creating war and trauma and division and destruction in the region, frankly, for centuries, definitely from the Sykes-Picot Pact, which divided that Balad al-Sham, the land, in 1916, and most graphically and clearly since the war against Iraq, which smashed the biggest Arab army from 1990 and the open invasion with 2003. Yeah. So what we're seeing in Syria is no different to these other episodes, and really the death squads in Syria misnamed the rebels, so really take a deep, long look at themselves of the dirty role they're providing for Zionism and imperialism in the region.
You're referring there to mercenaries, to death squads. Before I move on with the next question to our guest, Mr. Bakri, I'd just like to turn your attention to a comment that's been posted on our Facebook page about basically what's being called the Western support for the mercenaries, so to speak, or the death squads, as some have been claiming. We have put on our Facebook page a section for you to put your comments. Let's take a listen to what one of our viewers had to tell us.
They will support the fighters till Assad, the most opponent of Israel, is in power. If he will go, then these countries will kill these fighters with drones and will label them as Al-Qaeda terrorists.
That's Jassim Muzaffar who's made that comment for us on our Facebook page. Now, Mr. Bakri, the question here is, a lot of people are saying just the situation in Syria, what's basically making it different from other situations in the Middle East and North Africa is the fact that terrorist groups are now involved in this. And it's not just that we have terrorist groups and moderate forces, they're saying. It's the West supporting these death squads, so to speak, they say, or mercenary forces. And this is going to be, in the long term, against the interests of Syria as a sovereign nation. What do you think?
See, that fact is here, there is freedom fighters in Syria. You like to call them terrorists, or some people like to call them terrorists, but there are freedom fighters. They fight for their own lives, they fight for their own honor, they fight for their own dignity, they fight for the fact to establish the command of God instead to be this biased party criminal regime. Assad is a friend of the West, friend of America, friend of Russia, or he is like really, him and his fathers are closer to the Russian power than the Islamists. Suddenly now the Islamists will start to be accused to be terrorists, to be American agents. I don't believe that. You see, I believe that people of Syria rise for the sake of justice, for the sake to remove that corrupted regime, and no one for us to accept it oppositely just because he's supporting the fight against Israel. Though we don't believe ever Julian Haidt has been really involved in any fight against Israel, even his support to Hezbollah in Lebanon was a logistic support, not much really effective, we know very well. But now two wrongs doesn't make right. So it is really, we are going to say this man, he is the opponent of Israel, therefore we should accept his atrocity, his crimes. He's committing many massacres and mass killings. And now when people try to defend themselves, we call them terrorists. I think he tried to convince the Western power that he is at war against them, against terrorists in order to get their own sympathizers. But I think he's a loser.
Well, you're saying there that those who are fighting right now in Syria are freedom fighters. Mr. Sukan Chandan, there is, of course, a lot of disagreements when we want to categorize the people who are fighting right now. Some say that they include freedom fighters, as Mr. Bakri says, and terrorists. Some say that, in fact, there is no moderate forces involved. This has just become a mercenary force against President Assad, and it wants to bring down President Assad at any cost. How do you divide the various forces who are now fighting in Syria?
We can go into a complex discussion about the different strands within the armed opposition and non-armed opposition, which there is in Syria. But I think we have to zoom out and look at the bigger picture that's going on here. Because obviously people like Mr. Bakri will delude themselves because they feel that this is their moment to achieve their narrow political and sectarian interests in the region and beyond. But really what is going on is a clear Zionist and imperialist agenda, that Iraq was smashed and that they made it very clear, senior members of the military-industrial complex in the United States and in the West made it very clear they wanted to knock out all opposition, any semblance of obstacle to their total domination of the Middle East and North African region, and that's what the Syrian operation is all about. Now, of course, since the Libyan debacle, it's been proven that it's been a total nightmare. None of the so-called rebel factions, i.e. the death squads in Libya, have achieved anything that they wanted to achieve. It's total negative anarchy and disaster for the people of Libya. And similarly, they want to do the same thing with Syria. What do you think is going to happen if the Ba'athist government in Syria falls? Everyone knows, and Mr. Bakri knows very well himself, and he's being disingenuous perhaps to some extent, that everyone knows that after, that hopefully for the French and the British, and then subsequently the United States want the Syrian government to fall, Hezbollah, the most effective Arab resistance army against the Zionist state and imperialism, will be in the crosshairs next for NATO and their regional allies. This is the real big game plan, but of course Hezbollah will not be any push over. If they can defeat a massive conspiracy of the Israeli occupation in 2000 and then an open battle in the summer of 2006, you know, it's going to be pretty easy going to confront a bunch of ragtag terrorists being trained by the most reactionary states of the region, i.e. the Gulf, who are the enemies of the region, and by the puppet masters, which are the Western states of NATO. We really have to be a bit honest and look at the situation as it obviously is, rather than the delusions that's been peddled by Mr. Bakri.
Let's put this question to Mr. Bakri. Mr. Bakri, with the presence of these kinds of groups, the groups are being called extremists, the United States has called them terrorists. A lot of people are saying that even if Assad does fall and if that removal does take place, they're going to hand over an entire Syrian nation to a group of extremists. So what do you say about that? What do you think about a post-Assad Syria?
You see, I'm surprised really how it's easy for anybody, whether the East or the West, Western power claiming that those freedom fighters should be terrorists. And they are the people fight for their own really honor, for their own dignity, for their own state. They will fight Israel much better than Hezbollah, much better than Assad, who will really keep the security of the state of Israel in Lebanon. I think that those people... These people are more jihadi orientated. The people are working to establish Islam in the region. So I don't know why suddenly the freedom fighters, everybody likes to call them terrorists. You maybe disagree with the presence of foreigners, but in Islam we don't have something called foreigners. They are really Muslims who are from different parts of the world, and in Islam we don't call them foreigners. Foreigners are people who are kafir or occupied foreign forces. There's no foreign forces in Syria. Everybody fight there are the Muslims, the Muslim nation in the whole world stand with the uprising in Syria against the regime of Syria. The way they will stand against King Abdullah of Saudi Arabia one day. Because all those regimes in the regions are corrupted, man-led regimes, whether the evil regimes of Saudi Arabia or the evil regimes of Turkey or the evil Morsi or whatever. So after all, The change is taking place. Islamic Spring is on the region. In a matter of time, Assad will be run away to Iran or to any other countries, and the people will run their own affairs the way they believe.
Okay, now that brings us to the next question. But before we go to that question, I'd just like our viewers to take a look at another comment that's been put on our Facebook page, and we'll come back.
I think the US and EU want another Afghanistan. They both can't live without war because war is great business for them. The reason why they are fueling the violence in Syria is to create a post-Assad market for their arms trade. The next thing they will do is to enter Syria with the claim of fighting those militants they are currently arming.
Kim Young, one of our commentators there in Facebook with that comment. But now, Mr. Bakri, just one question I'll put to you, and I'll go to Mr. Chandan. You did refer there to some of your arguments on why the situation in Syria, the fighting should continue and President Assad removed. But a lot of people are saying right now, with the huge number of refugees, with civilians being targeted, with the very bad humanitarian situation on the ground, what Syria right now needs is a political solution, not more weapons, not a military solution. What's your idea about the solution right now?
Is that a question for me?
Yes, Mr. Bakri.
Okay, I don't believe anyway there's political solutions for the issue of Syria. Syria, there's only one solution. Either Assad, he take his back and get the sack and leave the countries and let the people decide for themselves, or it's going to be a fight until, let's say, we see until death. It's a matter of life and death issues. I don't think the people of Syria are going to return back. You see, the clock not going to return back. It's going to be continue until they have their own freedom, their own rights to establish what they believe. So whatever people try to sell out that actually wants political solutions, I think it's too late. After committing all this atrocity and the crimes and massacres, there's no way out. All those refugees around the world now, from the Syrians, especially in Iraq, in Lebanon, in Jordan, in Turkey, they cannot return back, and Assad is there. So there's no doubt the matter is become, blocked. So there's only one way out. He should himself really leave and go to any other country if he doesn't want to be killed. Otherwise, I think it's a matter of time and a matter of price.
Yes.
So Assad is over.
But now, Mr. Sagar Chandan, do you think it's become too late for a political or negotiated solution to this?
No, it's not too late. And actually, the only reason why we have to ask ourselves, why has Western opinion slightly shifted in terms of going for negotiations a bit more than the Kofi Annan plan? Well, Mr. Brahimi said very clearly in a recent interview with another channel that actually during Kofi Annan's time, the international community, i.e. imperialism, was not interested in negotiations with the Syrian government. And now, because things have shifted, they are. And why have things shifted? There are two fundamental reasons, basically. One is that imperialism and its allies, including Mr. Bakri in Lebanon, actually, and it's total illusions of grandeur coming out of Mr. Bakri, thinking that his death squad friends can defeat the Zionist state in an open confrontation like Hezbollah did. It's an insult to the Lebanese resistance, it's an insult to the Lebanese and Arab and Muslim peoples around the world, the kind of nonsense he's coming out with. But that aside, what they were hoping was that the Sunni Muslims who comprise the majority of the Syrian Arab army of the Syrian government would defect towards the death squads. They have not, and that indicates that there's still mass support for the Syrian Ba'ath government in Syria. And the second fundamental premise of why Western attitudes has shifted was a very underreported and hardly reported historical development, was that the Russian Chief of Staff conducted a joint military naval exercise just last month, that's January 2013, off the coast of Syria. This was a clear indicator, better and more powerful than any other, on a framework of internationalism of the global south between Syria and its international allies, that imperialism should back off and think twice before it's going to roll on Syria. Just like Chavez had a joint military exercise which was historical with the Russian military, naval military in December 2008, right under the noses of US imperialism. This is the type of internationalism that we believe in, the internationalism of Syria and Chavez and others.
So you're saying here that it's actually not too late for a political solution, and a lot of people, Mr. Bakri, this question to you, a lot of people are suggesting that it's never actually too late for a political or negotiated solutions, because we cannot fight a war when the cost becomes too heavy, when we have such a large number of civilians being targeted, being killed, slaughtered, or being displaced. So would you say, however, that a military approach should continue at any cost?
I believe the matter has become a matter of life and death, and the fight should continue regardless of how many people are going to be killed. Remember, they used to be killed, they used to be massacred without even they used to carry weapons. I think Assad, he just really did not take the opportunities and in the beginnings and try to tell it to stop out that problem by making some form of people to vote for themselves. I think he missed it. Now the people are going to fight till their own victory, till they get their own rights, and no way for any political solution. Now, if you want to continue fight, but the loser is going to be in the region, not Islam, not the Muslims, because the Muslims always are in prison. The Muslims are always has been run by the dictators in the region. Now, I think the Muslims going to come to power. Let Israel become piece of cake, or we fight not on the fight of the so-called method, and we see what happened with Hezbollah.
Well,
never liberate any land, never liberate Palestine, never do anything, useful to say is liberation.
Right, Mr. Bakri, I'll stop you there if I may. I'm afraid we've run out of time. Last minute to our guest, Mr. Chandan, and your conclusion, Mr. Chandan. You said earlier that you think some Western states have come out and said they're more in favour of a negotiated solution, basically have hinted towards that effect. But also we're hearing the same time that Britain, William Hague, saying that we're going to do whatever it takes. So do you think that from this stage on we're going to see a further militarisation?
Well, Mr. Hague and the French senior government are as incoherent and ridiculous as that analysis, what passes an analysis that Mr. Bakri has been given. That they're stuck between a rock and a hard place. They're basically, like Libya, it's actually the French and the British who are trying to get the American, that's the United States military prowess to do their work for them in Syria. It seems Mr. Obama, the United States, is actually quite uninterested in doing that. So now, recognizing that situation, they're having to, because of the situation on the ground in Syria, and because of Chinese and Russian support and support from Latin America, they are starting to open up negotiations with Syria. And really, God willing, that the Syrian people will see peace soon. All right,
thank you very much, Mr. Sukhant Chandan, independent filmmaker and political analyst, with us there live from London, and on the line with us from Beirut, founder of Hizb ut-Tahrir UK branch, Sheikh Omar Bakri. Thank you very much for staying with another edition of The Debate. From me, Homa Leslie, until our next programme. Goodbye.